Varpas sunaikino okupantas, bet jo įrašas yra gyvas mūsų širdyse. Tas laisvės nevertas, kas negina jos. Tolimesnį programos vedimui kviečiu ponę Karilę Valaitinį.
Amerikos ir Lietuvos himnai. Muzika žodžiai Putino. Prisimenant ir pagerbiant žuvusius už Lietuvos laisvę, prisimenant nukankintus kalėjimuos ir mirusius Sibire, giesmė pagerbiant amžinybėn iškeliavusius mūsų visuomeninio ir kultūrinio darbo veteranus, o ypač praėjusiais metais mirusi Lietuvos generalinį konsulą Dr. Petrą Daugžvardį. The following hymn is dedicated to the memory of all those who lost their lives in the fight for freedom of Lithuania, and especially for the late Lithuania's Consul General, Dr. Petras Daugžvardis. A few moments, please, while the choir members take their places in the house. Įžanginės maldos skaitimui kviečiu Jolitą Kriaučeliūnaitę ir Martiną Trakį. For the invocation, I'd like to present Miss Jolita Kriaučeliūnas and Martin Trakis. I would like to ask you, please, to stand up.
Viešpatie, tavo valia ir mūsų ainių tautos ryžtu lietuviai apsigyveno Nemuno, Baltijos, Neries žemių plotuose. Mylėjo jie tą žemę, gynė ir taikiai ramiai gyveno. Jau 720 metų sukūrė savo valstybę, kuri net Europą apgynė nuo totorių antplūdžio ir kitų pasikėsintojų prieš savo valstybę. Ėjo laikai, keitėsi valstybių jėgos ir dalinama Lietuva, susilpsta ir pavergiama caristinės Rusijos. Virš 100 metų Rusijos vergijoje, virš 100 metų draudžia raštą, knygą, bet lietuvis išlieka stiprus savo dvasia, kaip ąžuolas prie Nemunėlio. Tai kas, kad knygnešiai kelią Sibiran kaulais nuklojo, žuvo kalėjimuose, lietuvis pakėlė kančią, nes tautos dainius vaidylą dainavo. Pavasaris eina Karpatų kalnais, ateis laisvė ir Lietuvai.
Dunda patrankos, dreba žemė, krinta carų ir kaizerių sostai. Ir garbingi Lietuvos vyrai 1918 metais vasario 16 dieną Vilniuje paskelbė laisva ir nepriklausoma Lietuvos valstybė. Viešpatie, koks džiaugsmas, kokia padėka. Nors krito kariai pakelėse ir pamiškėse, nors krauju prasruvo Nemunai nevėžiai, bet apgynė Lietuvą.
Bet Dieve, Ribbentropo, Molotovo juoda sąžinė, pasirašytos sutartys niaukia Lietuvos padangę. Veržiasi imperialistinio Rusijos komunizmo ordos. Vėl vergija, vėl Sibiras, kalėjimai. Vėl lietuvis vergas be valstybės, be žodžio, sąžinės laisvės. Vėl kankinamas. Ir verkia Lietuva sūnų partizanų. Kristau, tu verkiai savo tėvynės. Kristau, smukelių ir rūpintojėlių, rymodamas Lietuvos kelių pakelėse. Matai kančią, maldaujame, savo malonę stiprink lietuvį laisvės kovai, lengvink sunkią jo dalią. Dieve, amžių kūrėjau, artink Lietuvos laisvės aušrą.
Lietuvos nepriklausomybės akto skaitymas, kurį skaitys Vladas Žukauskas ir asistuoja Julė Sakalauskaitė ir Rima Skorupskaitė. For the reading of the Declaration of Independence of Lithuania, I'd like to present Vladas Žukauskas, assisted by Julė Sakalauskas and Rima Skorupskas.
Nutarimas. Lietuvos taryba savo posėdyje vasario 16 dieną 1918 metais vienu balsu nutarė kreiptis į Rusijos, Vokietijos ir kitų valstybių vyriausybės šio pareiškimu. Lietuvos taryba, kaip po vienintelė lietuvių tautos atstovybė, remdamos pripažintąją tautų apsisprendimo teise ir Lietuvių Vilniaus konferencijos nutarimu rugsėjo mėnesio 18-23 dienos 1917 metais skelbia atstatanti nepriklausomą demokratiniais pamatais sutvarkytą Lietuvos valstybę, su sostinė Vilniuje ir ta valstybė atskirianti nuo visų valstybinių ryšių, kurie yra buvę su kitomis tautomis. Drauge Lietuvos taryba pareiškia, kad Lietuvos valstybės pamatus ir jos santykius su kitomis valstybėmis privalo galutinai nustatyti kiek galima greičiau sušauktas steigiamasis Seimas, demokratiniu būdu visų jos gyventojų išrinktas. Lietuvos taryba pranešdama apie tai vyriausybei prašo pripažinti nepriklausomą Lietuvos valstybę. Pasirašė Vilniuje vasario 16 dieną 1918 metais Basanavičius, Banaitis, Biržiška, Bizauskas, Dovydaitis, Kairys, Klimas, Malinauskas, Mironas, Narutavičius, Petrulis, K. Šaulys, J. Šaulys, Šernas, Smetona, Smilgevičius, Staugaitis, Stulginskis, Vailokaitis ir Vileišis.
Dabar norėčiau pakviesti ponę Juzę Daušvardienę, Lietuvos generalinę konsulę. I would like to present the Consul General of Lithuania, Mrs. Juzė Daušvardis.
Mielieji, gerieji lietuviai, lietuvės. 1918 metais vasario 16 lietuvių tautai didelio džiaugsmo diena nušvito padangė laisvės nepriklausomybės šviesa po ilgos tamsios okupacinės nakties. Laisvės šviesoje suskubo suskato lietuviai atstatyti nuteriotą kraštą. Palyginamai trumpame laikotarpyje Lietuva tapo mažoji Amerika. Klestėjo ji kultūrinėje, ekonominėje, tarptautinėje plotmėje. Prisiminimai kai kurių tų atsiekimų šįmet minėsime Lietuvos universitetų 50-metį, 50 metų nuo Jungtinių Amerikos valstybių de jure Lietuvos pripažinimo ir kitas panašias sukaktis. Lietuvos santykiai su kitom valstybėm buvo pavyzdingi. Pasirašyta eilė sutarčių, pasitikėta kaimynų vylingai gražiais pažadais. Deja, už tų pažadų slypėjo šėtoniški kėslai, slapti susitarimai. Lietuva tapo sovietų nacių intrigos auka. Užstojo antra, tamsesnė už pirmąją, tebesitęsianti okupacinė naktis atnešusi siaubo, kraujo, nežmoniškos kančios ir priespaudos periodą. Lietuvių tauta bei laisvasis pasaulis tos okupacijos nepripažįsta. Ta liudija vasario 16 proga Jungtinių Amerikos valstybių valstybės sekretoriaus Rogers raštas Lietuvos atstovui, senatorių, kongresmanų vieši pareiškimai, gubernatorių bei burmistrų išleistos proklamacijos. Mes priimame kiekvieną okupacijos nepripažinimo išraišką mielai, su viltimi, kad gal sulauksime ir akcijos Lietuvos išlaisvinimui iš sovietinės okupacijos. Abejingai stebime tarptautinės pingpongiškos politikos bei diplomatijos eigą, pasukusią netikėtais, nenumatytais povingiais. Rodos nekaltas, neazartiškas sportas pingpongas nustebino pasaulį, pravėręs tampriai užsklęstą bambuko uždangą. To pasėkoje pašalinti iš Jungtinių tautų laisvosios Kinijos valdžios atstovai be atodairos jų vietas užėmė komunistinio režimo atstovai nuo pirmos dienos pasireiškusi kaip įžūlūs rėksniai. Šią savaitę pasaulio akys nukreiptos į Pekiną. Ką atneš prezidento Niksono kelionė? Pamatysim. Ką atneš prezidento vėlesnė kelionė į Maskvą, mes, lietuviai, lengvai galime atspėti. Pasitikėt, kad vienur ar kitur be mūsų įtaigavimo būtų prisiminta Lietuvos byla ir jos apgailėtina padėtis, negalime laukti. Mums reikia budėti, stipriai vieningai veikti, kad Lietuvos ir lietuvių tauta nebūtų užmiršta. Visur ir visada pabrėžtinai priminti, kad Lietuva tebėra smurtu okupuota, kad jo žmonėm atimtos pagrindinės žmogaus teisės, kad laisvė turi būti grąžinta. Prezidentas Niksonas paskelbė 8 punktus Vietnamo karo pabaigimui, taikos grąžinimui. Mums, lietuvių tautai, reikia tik 3 punktų, būtent. Pirma, reikalauti, kad okupantas nustotų naikinęs mūsų kraštą ir engęs jo žmonės. Antra, kad politiniai ir religiniai kaliniai turi būti išlaisvinti ir ištremtieji grąžinti į Lietuvą. Trečia, okupantai, pasitraukite iš Lietuvos. Lietuva turi būti laisva ir nepriklausoma.
Jeigu daktaras Bobelis yra salėje, jis yra kviečiamas į užkulisį scenos, prašau. Dabar seka rezoliucijų priėmimas, kurį skaito Aldona Indreikaitė, Čikagos Lietuvių tarybos sekretorė. The adaptations of resolutions. Resolution. We, Lithuanian Americans of Chicago, Illinois, assembled this 20th day of February 1972 at the Auditorium Theater to commemorate the 54th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence of Lithuania, unanimously adopted the following resolution. Whereas, on February 16, 1918, the Lithuanian nation proclaimed its independence, exercising the right of self-determination to be free and independent for all time. And whereas, By the Peace Treaty of July 12, 1920, Soviet Russia recognized Lithuania as a self-governing and completely independent state, and by the Non-Aggression Pact, signed September 28, 1926, undertook to represent the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and inviolability of Lithuania under all circumstances. And whereas, in total disregard of its treaties and pledges, the Soviet Union in 1940 of June seized Lithuania by armed force and illegally incorporated the country into the Soviet Union in violation of international law, the Atlantic Charter, and the Charter of the United Nations. And whereas the Soviets deprived the free and proud people of Lithuania of their basic human and civil rights, converted the prospering country into a pauperized vassal of the Soviet Empire, and these conditions continue to this day. Now therefore be it resolved that we again express our sincerest gratitude to the government of the United States of America for its steadfast non-recognition of the Soviet seizure and incorporation of Lithuania, and trust that this policy will be continued until Lithuania and the other Baltic states are again free and independent. Be it also resolved that the leaders of the free world are urgently implored to uphold their morally correct position and avoid any maneuvers which might lead to condoning the Soviet-Russian crime of the enslavement of Lithuania and the other Baltic states. Be it also resolved that we request the President of the United States to raise the issue of Lithuania's liberation at the forthcoming and all other negotiations with the Soviet rulers in Moscow. Be it also resolved that we request that the foreign policy of the United States government include the liberation of the Baltic states as an integral factor in its European security program. Be it also resolved that this resolution be sent to the President of the United States, to the Secretary of State of the United States, to the senators and congressmen from our state, to the Secretary General of the United Nations, and to the press. Thank you. Dabar norėčiau pakviesti Amerikos Lietuvių tarybos pirmininką daktarą Kazį Bobelį. The President of the American Lithuanian Council, Dr. Kazys Bobelis, please.
Mėly lietuviai, šiandieną yra labai malonu jūs pasveikinti Amerikos Lietuvių tarybos vardu čia taip gausiai susirinkusius atšvęsti mūsų didelę ir garbingą šventę. Mūsų savo atsilankimu pagerbė vienas iš didžiųjų Amerikos politikos vadovų, Respublikonų partijos vadas, senatorius iš Kansas štato. Senatorius iš Kansas štato yra artimas prezidento Niksono draugas, stiprus jo tarptautinės ir vidinės politikos rėmėjas ir labai stipriai pasisakęs daugelį atvejų prieš komunizmą. Jis yra artimas etninių grupių draugas ir stiprai įvertina etninių grupių reikšmę Amerikos valstybinėme bei politinėme gyvenime. Būdamas labai užimtas, ypatingai šiais metais, kuomet jis turi kalbėti beveik kasdieną, jisai maloniai sutiko dalyvauti mūsų šioje šventėje ir tuo pačiu pagerbti mūsų Lietuvos valstybę, jos nepriklausomybės paminėjimo dieną. Tikrai mums yra labai malonu turėti savo tarpę senatorių iš Kansas valstybės. Daugelis jį vadina vanagu, ar kaip sako Hawk, ypatingai kairieji liberalai, vien todėl, kad jisai stipriai pasisako kad su komunizmu vienintelis būdas kovoti yra tokiu pačiu ginklu, kokį ir komunistai naudoja. Mr. Chairman, Senator Dole, ladies and gentlemen, I am deeply honored to have this opportunity to present to you one of our most distinguished senators, a great national political leader. He was born in Russell, Kansas, and received his law degree from Washburn University. After honorable service with the United States Army during the World War II in Italy, where he was wounded twice and also decorated for heroic achievement, he returned to his home state and in 1951 was elected to the Kansas public office. In 1960, he was elected to the House of Representatives of the United States, and again in 1968 as a senator from Kansas. He is a close friend of President Nixon and a very strong supporter of his foreign and domestic policies. In 1971, he became chairman of the Republican National Committee. He early recognized dangers of international communist infiltration and stood firmly against its expansive policies. He also is a very close and great friend of all ethnic nationality groups, and we Americans of Lithuanian descent are greatly honored by his presence here today. Ladies and gentlemen, Honorable Robert J. Dole, Senator from Kansas and Chairman of the Republican National Committee.
Thank you very much. I understood the second introduction better than the first. Let me say that I am very happy to be here, and I'm very proud to be the chairman of the Republican Party. We are a minority group, and every group must have a chairman. I think we're making some progress in America, but I can say very frankly that many people ask me how I became the chairman of the Republican Party, and more people ask me after I've spoken than before. And so perhaps I should tell you how it happened. In December of 1970, when the Republican Party was without a chairman because of Mr. Morton moving in the job of Secretary of the Interior, I happened to visit the White House. And I was on one of those early morning tours where they point out this and that room and all the other rooms, and we walked by the President's Oval Office. The President was standing outside with one of his aides, and the aide said to the President, he said, "Mr. President, there goes Senator Dole." And the President said, "Oh, is that Senator Dole?" We were very close. And the President called me over and he said, "Senator, are you from Russell, Kansas?" And I said, "Yes, Mr. President." He said, "I've always wanted a national chairman from Russell, Kansas, so that's probably why I'm the chairman of the Republican Party. I'm not certain how many people here know where Russell, Kansas is, or how many may have visited that area. But I do believe very strongly in what the President has done and what the President is doing. And I'll try to be fairly nonpartisan in my remarks, but I think perhaps this is an election year. I think everyone here recognizes the importance of an election year. Many recognize how it's denied in other countries, free elections, and we take it very seriously, so I'm sure you take it very seriously. So I was pleased to accept the invitation and very honored to accept the invitation. I think I know, having some experience with freedom and some experience with independence, having spent 39 months in hospitals after World War II, what the word freedom means and and how some people understand it and some people seem to misunderstand it in America. And some of these people occupy very high positions in our government. But I know this group understands the meaning of the word independence. It is a powerful word. It stands for a concept that has always motivated the lives of people here in this country and of people in the land of your fathers and of good people everywhere. And in this country, as in Lithuania, and in freedom-loving countries everywhere, it is a concept that people have willingly given their lives to preserve. And it is a concept that today, in a small country on the rimland of Southeast Asia, has stirred the souls of a beleaguered people and prompted selfless sacrifice by American men. You may know that there also occurs in the month of February another anniversary that we celebrate in our party. It is a Republican anniversary, the birthday of our first Republican president, Abraham Lincoln. And it is an occasion in many ways similar to this one. When people come together, as you come together on this Sunday, to celebrate the 54th day of the Declaration, 54th day of the Declaration of Independence, to rededicate yourselves, and we try to rededicate ourselves to the principles of what our party stands for and what our party should stand for in the future of America and the free world. And Lincoln defined and expressed much of the essence of Republican philosophy. He devoted his life, in fact, he gave it up for the ideals which he held so important. But during his life and during his presidency, he acted on these ideals, and they enabled him to lead a divided nation out of the horrors of a civil war. And I believe those same ideals guide and motivate the Republican Party today. And today, those same ideals are enabling the present Republican president to guide this nation in a very divided world. And as the chairman of my party and a member of the United States Senate, I have had many occasions in the past several weeks, and many more coming, to speak at Lincoln Day celebrations. And at each one of them, I have sought to remind those in attendance of the tradition that Lincoln passed on to the Republican Party. It was he who defined and redefined the Republican creed. And the essence of that creed, in our time as in his, can be stated in one word: freedom. Republicans believe that all men deserve a full and equal measure of freedom, and that all men have a responsibility and share the right to make their own way in a society without undue interference by government or by fellow citizens. And I believe that under Lincoln, America was dedicated to this concept, and during the Civil War years, Americans came to understand with Lincoln that a nation cannot exist half slave and half free. And I believe there are some parallels between Lincoln's time and President Nixon's time. I believe that under Richard Nixon, the American people know, and the people around the world continue in the knowledge that the world cannot exist. Indeed, it may not long survive half slave and half free. But freedom thrives on peace. Peace and freedom go together. And shortly before he died, Lincoln challenged his fellow citizens, free men in a free land, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves with all Americans. And this indeed is a proper task of free men, and it is the task which President Nixon has set for himself. And now in Guam, and perhaps now having left Guam, he will depart shortly on the final leg of what could be an historic journey for peace. And President Nixon has not made any promises. In fact, he has cautioned against over-optimism. He has not made any predictions on what may happen with these visits with Chinese leaders, either this week or in May in Moscow. He hasn't said they'll resolve all the differences between our country and our philosophy and our idealism. Quite the opposite, as I said. He's cautioned Americans everywhere and cautioned free world leaders everywhere not to expect too much. But his ultimate goal is clear and unambiguous. He wants what we all want: a full generation of peace. And throughout this century, lasting peace has been the dream of all men. And today it is much more than just a dream. It is no certainty, and no one dare say that peace is just around the corner. There are no shortcuts to peace, save the abandonment of our freedom. And you and I can be assured that this president of this nation will never agree to settle for peace if that settlement means surrender anywhere in the world. But an honorable peace is in sight. And I believe the ground is now being prepared for lasting peace that is fair and just. And a full generation of peace has much to offer those who treasure freedom. It is true, of course, that freedom will survive under almost any pressure. No matter what obstacles are imposed, no matter by whom, good men will hold on to their ideal of freedom and will continue to hope and to work for its survival and its expansion. The freedom-loving people of Lithuania are dramatic proof of that. Yes, freedom will survive under any conditions, but I believe, and President Nixon believes, that in a peaceful world, freedom will not just endure. It will flourish and it will expand. And free men are at their best in a world at peace. They never shrink from confrontation when it's necessary to preserve liberty, but they never seek confrontation when it is not. And in a world marked by tension and conflict between nations, the energies of free men must be turned inward to considerations of their own vital interests and to defense against threats to their own survival. In a more peaceful world, free men may turn their energies more vigorously outward. I believe, as I've said, that peace and freedom go together. It is natural for free men to seek peace. As it is natural, that in peace men will seek freedom. And that is what President Nixon believes. And that is a justification for his trips to mainland China and to Moscow. And that is the hope which must guide us in our support and our prayers for his efforts not to succeed, not because his name is Richard Nixon, and not because he is a Republican, but because he does offer the best hope for the free world. But make no mistake about it, President Nixon believes, and I have seen it demonstrated time after time in the Congress and by words of the President, that we have a responsibility in America to remain strong. And in the past 3 years, he and his administration have worked long and hard to that end. Now, there's some in Congress who disagree. I'm not one of those. I would not waste one dime for our national defense if I felt it were wasted. And I would be the first to vote to cut any program that would include waste. Last month, President Nixon delivered his State of the Union message. And in that he said about our defense policy, let us remember that strong military defenses are not the enemy of peace. They are the guardians of peace. And I believe in those few words President Nixon said, and demonstrated and emphasized and underscored a responsible position, a responsible basis for American defense planning in today's world. I think we must be on guard. I haven't seen any great change in the attitudes of communist countries. I think we've taken care to do that. The President has done this by restoring our own defense alliances and by renewing America's own resolve. No country that's built on such a principle ought to ever apologize for its strength. And no country as great and as good as America ought to ever be ashamed of its strength. And no country like America, on which so many of the people in the world rely for guidance and look to as a beacon of hope for freedom, ought to ever willingly abandon the strength of America. And yet there are some. There are some who say we can no longer afford to be strong. We must reorder our national priorities. Well, I come from a small state and a small town, but I believe the people there are much like the people in great areas like Chicago and suburban Chicago and all across this nation. Every time I list my priorities, and I heard all those who say otherwise, but every time I list my priorities, perhaps because of habit, perhaps because I'm not an intellectual, I place our national security on top of that list. Because what good does it do? What good would it do to spend millions and millions and billions, if you please, on other programs and lose our liberty and freedom in the process? And I ask that question of some of those who seek the presidency. Last year in the Senate, there was an amendment in the Senate which would have cut our defense budget some 25%. Many good-intentioned Americans, many sincere Americans, and perhaps others in a free world believe this might be possible. We could save this money and spend it on farm programs or urban programs, and there are plenty of problems in America. We could place our money. But who supported this amendment in the United States Senate? Who voted for this radical proposal, so dangerous to the future of a strong America? Well, Senator Muskie voted for it, and Senator Hubert Humphrey, who always has a lot to say about keeping America strong, voted for the amendment. And Senator George McGovern not only voted for it, he wanted to cut it $30 billion, almost 40%. And what some of these who now seek to be president are saying shouldn't really surprise us. After all, many seem to live in their own dream world where problems will go away if one only wishes hard enough, where rhetoric takes the place of resolve, and where the only thing worth fighting for is political ambitions. And in this dream world of theirs, the only thing worth defending, it seems, is their own record. Hard as some of them try, they're impossible to defend. But what is surprising is that these Democrats can say the things they say and expect the American people to respond in November. And I've been in the Congress 12 years. I was there during the escalation of the war in Southeast Asia, and I supported my presidents, Kennedy and Johnson. I'm a Republican. They were Democrats. Maybe they were wrong. Maybe I was wrong. But I felt in my time in the Congress, when it involves our national security, when it involves our national preparedness, there comes a time when we set aside party politics and partisanship and support our government. I hope this is a principle that some will adhere to. I don't believe anyone in this group wants America to surrender anywhere. I don't believe anyone in this group wants America to give up on freedom anywhere in the world. And so I say we must I would agree that maybe 8 points aren't necessary. Maybe 3 are enough. 3 elections. Elimination of occupation forces. Let me say one thing in conclusion. We're trying to negotiate a peace in Southeast Asia. The leader of our government happens to be President Nixon at this time. I've said many, many times, if we would support our president and have a united government, the enemy might listen. Senator McGovern says we ought to accept the communist offer. Senator Muskie said, well, a coalition wouldn't be bad because some communist governments are better than others. But you answer that question, and you think about that question. And Senator Kennedy said he would crawl to the communists for a settlement. I don't think these are solutions to America, the future of America, and the future of the free world. You can't solve the problem with communism by running away from it, or by turning your backs on it, or by yielding to it. And in Vietnam, the only solution they offer is retreat. And I know about the escalation of the war. I know its origins. I know some 50,000 Americans have lost their lives there. Now for those same to say it was a tragic mistake, it was a waste of American lives, seems to me to be somewhat, at least to be inconsistent. We have another matter pending in the Congress right now, and I know my good friend Congressman Pucinski shares this view, as does Senator Percy, who will be here later this afternoon. Senator Fulbright, who carries on as chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, would have us further weaken our position around the world by cutting off funds for Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty. And I find this to be appalling. The idea of shutting off Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty is appalling. Now, it's been said by some that consulting Senator Fulbright on foreign policy is like going to the Boston Strangler for a neck massage. This may or may not be true, but I find his efforts now to cut off funds for Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty, as I said, not only appalling, but somewhat ridiculous. He's on the verge, if he succeeds, of doing something the communists haven't been able to do for 20 years. And I don't believe we should give the Senate Foreign Relations Chairman that power. And I would ask some of his Democrat colleagues who are now in New Hampshire and Florida to come back to the Senate just long enough to express themselves on this very vital issue, to tell their colleague and tell their friend Senator Fulbright that you've gone far enough. I don't think it would hurt their campaigns that much. But the senator from Arkansas, in his desire to achieve direct power over the funding of the Department of State, would destroy any objects which would not be within easy reach of his committee's jurisdiction. And this has been the case with such non-government organizations as Radio Liberty and Radio Free Europe. And in pursuing his objective, Fulbright would thwart the will of the Congress and the American public support for these radio stations. He would complement and extend the pattern of the Democrat Party, first into wars, first in the favor of dishonorable retreat, and first in the favor of abandonment of America's friends. And those who would stifle the sending of truth to the enslaved people of the Soviet Empire do us all a disservice and betray the very principle which they so loudly proclaimed in earlier years. And let yourselves be heard in the Congress on this issue, and let us not forget that the truth is the first step to freedom and the key to sustaining hopes of freedom, even in the oppressive folds of Soviet imperialism. So I call upon you to respond. If you agree, if you disagree, you needn't respond. But you have congressmen, you have influential senators, you know people across this country who believe that Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty should continue in its present form. We do not need to retreat in disarray in Vietnam. We need not abandon our allies in Europe. And we certainly should not cut off our modest support for an organization which millions of people look to for the truth about what is happening in a changing world. I would say then in closing that this is an election year. I don't have any personal quarrel with my colleagues in the Senate who want to be president. That's a very laudable objective, a very laudable goal. We are a great country. We are a strong country. I believe we should remain strong and free. And I believe we have an obligation, those who seek freedom in other parts of the world, to be of assistance and to be strong and to show those who think otherwise that we're not a paper tiger, that we believe in freedom, that we're willing to pay for freedom. And I would say then that we've had one change in America in the past 3 years. We've had leadership in the White House. And I've been there through the months when the escalation continued and continued and continued. When I went to Washington in 1961, my daughter was 5 years of age, and she doesn't remember how the war started. She doesn't remember that when President Eisenhower left office, there were 700 people in South Vietnam and not one casualty. She was only 9 in 1963 when President Kennedy sent 17,000 troops there, and I didn't oppose that. I supported that. But she doesn't remember because she was only 9. And she was only 10 when the House and the Senate passed the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, virtually unanimously. 414 to 0 in the House, 88 to 2 in the Senate. And she didn't remember that, and I voted for it in the House. I'm not ashamed of that. But in the Senate, it was supported by Senator Humphrey and Muskie and Jackson and Kennedy and Fulbright and McGovern and all the others who now point their finger at Vietnam and say it's a tragic mistake, it's a shame, it's a black mark on the history of America. They were there during the escalation, but my daughter and hundreds and thousands and millions of other young Americans have forgotten that. And they don't remember in 1965 that President Johnson ordered bombing of North Vietnam, and I supported that. So there are 540,000 Americans in Southeast Asia, 31,000 killed, and a couple 100,000 wounded when President Nixon assumed the burdens of the presidency. But by May 1 of this year, 87%, not 7% or not 80%, but 87% of those Americans will have been brought back to America because of President Nixon's leadership. And I tell my young friends to remember also that during those years of escalation, President Nixon was not in the Congress. He was not the vice president. He had no vote. He had no voice. He made no policy. He didn't send a single man to Southeast Asia. But he believes in a generation of peace, as I think most Americans do. And sometime he must make sacrifices for peace and freedom. And I believe most Americans agree we must from time to time. Not seek confrontation, but not run from it. Unless we want to be enslaved and lose our freedom. And finally, this is a critical year in America. I think it's a critical year for every freedom-loving person in the world. What we do in America is important everywhere in the world, particularly in those areas where freedom-loving people reside. And who we choose to be our next president is important to everyone in the world who seek freedom. And I say as honestly and as sincerely as I can, look at the records of the candidates. See what they say and what they do. Sometimes there's a vast difference between what they say and what they do. Ask yourself, as this man, whoever he may be, demonstrated a capacity for leadership? Is he willing to keep America strong? And we seek no territory. We seek no new wars. We seek peace. Peace through strength. And this must be our priority in 1972. We're looking for leadership of the free world when we vote in November. And I say, as you might expect me to say, but I would say it in any event, that I believe President Nixon has offered that leadership. And I believe those who would thwart the president from time to time would support the president, not because he's President Nixon, but to let the enemy know for once in the world, wherever it may be, whoever it may be, that the American people are united for peace. This doesn't mean surrender. This doesn't mean retreat. This doesn't mean unpreparedness. And that's an obligation we have. We don't like the obligation. Someone else might assume it. Who could assume the obligation to lead the free world if we failed? Remain strong. So I say in this year in the United States Congress, take a look at the records, not just the speeches. Take a look at mine. I'm not running for anything in the state of Illinois. Look at my record and judge what I say. Look at President Nixon's records and judge what he says. And look at the record of most of the other senators who are running for president. They're not all running for president. I met one the other day who said he wasn't a candidate. But most of them are. I believe that this group understands independence, as I said, and freedom. And I believe you will act accordingly to support those who understand the word independence and understand what freedom and liberty means. Thank you very much.
On behalf of Lithuanian American Council, I would like to express our most sincere appreciation for Senator Dole to come out here to Chicago and to speak on our very, very commemorative day. Thank you very much, Senator. Dabar taip pat yra mums didelis malonumas pristatyti man vieną iš mūsų senų draugų, kuris per daugelį metų kartu su mumis čia Čikagoje gyvena ir yra beveik nepraleidęs ne vieno mūsų didesnio minėjimo. Jūs visi jį gerai pažįstate, jis labai stipriai kiekvieną progą pasireiškia dėl Lietuvos laisvės ir kiekvieną pasitaikančią progą jis bando iškelti Lietuvos ir kitų Pabaltijo valstybių pavergimo klausimą. Jis yra didelis rėmėjas pavergtųjų tautų ir kiekviena proga taip pat dalyvauja pavergtųjų tautų parade Čikagoje. At this time, I'm very happy to present to you one of our most sincere friends. He has a very long record devoted to the public life, elected to the Congress in 1958. During the World War II, he served with distinction with the United States Army and Air Force, receiving the Distinguished Flying Cross and Medal with Clusters. He was chief investigator who exposed the mass murder by communists of the 15,000 Polish army officers at Katyn. He's an outspoken speaker to the cause of captive nations and a very, very aggressive fighter for justice for all people. He's very well known to all of us, and I'm very greatly honored to ask the Honorable Roman Pucinski, Congressman of the 11th Congressional District, and who is also Democratic candidate for Senate, Congressman Pucinski.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Laba diena, mano drogai Lietuvai. Dr. Bobelis, Dr. Pakawa, a very distinguished and honored Consul General of Lithuania, Mrs. Dasvardis, my fellow Americans of Lithuanian background, I'm most pleased to be here this afternoon to join with you in rekindling our determination that there can be no peace in this world until the holiday of Lithuanian independence becomes a permanent fixture of our society. This is the 54th anniversary of Lithuania's independence. It's on February 16th, 1918. Great hope and great expectation. The people of Lithuania joined the family of free nations, only to have that freedom, that hope, that dignity destroyed brutally and barbarically by the Soviets in 1940. As we assemble here today to pay tribute to the 54th anniversary of Lithuanian independence, let us all agree that one of the darkest pages of freedom's history was when independence of Lithuania was destroyed by the Soviets in 1940. We're here today not only to rededicate ourselves to this noble cause. We're here today for many reasons. One of these reasons is to pay honor to a great American, a great Lithuanian, the late Consul General Dasvardis. I knew him well, and he symbolized and epitomized the driving spirit of the Lithuanian people. working tirelessly and fearlessly for justice for Lithuania. And as you pay honor to him today, you honor all the sons and daughters of Lithuania who have given their lives on the altar of freedom. We're here also today as the President begins his historic mission to Peking. I don't know whether the mission is going to be successful or not, but I have said time and time again, while we Americans may differ on methods, we never differ on principle. And I would hope that you would join me at this point in a minute of silent prayer. Prayer for the success of the President's mission in his search for peace and our hopes that he shall return back home safely. But as we pray for the success of the President's mission, we Americans cannot help but include in that prayer a fervent hope that finally, at some point in time, civilization, freedom-loving people, honest political leaders will realize once and for all there can never be any lasting peace, and freedom shall always be under serious challenge so long as Lithuania and her people remain under the barbaric rule of the communists. The world's conscience can't rest. A visit to Peking is a hopeful turn, but we wish that out of that visit will come a new realization of the enormous job that lies ahead. And after the President comes back from Peking, we Americans pray that as he prepares for his visit to Moscow, and here will be the proof of the pudding. I listened with great interest to the previous speaker, but I saw no commitment, and I heard no commitment of a concern for the fact that Lithuania, on her 54th anniversary of independence, is today in communist bondage. But the proof of the pudding of this visit to Moscow will be whether a great American president will include on his agenda a firm demand that the Soviet Union restore freedom and sovereignty to the Baltic states of Europe, including Lithuania. We ethnics, those of us whose descendants and relatives are today living behind the Iron Curtain, are becoming weary of the platitudes of politicians who tell us great things and make great statements. But when the occasion arises, somehow or other forget that there can be no peace in this world until those enslaved countries rejoin the family of free nations. It is my hope that when Mr. Nixon goes to Moscow and sits down with Brezhnev and Kosygin and the leaders of the Politburo, he will remind them to this day the United States fails to recognize the acquisition of Lithuania, and we recognize Lithuania as a free and sovereign state with a full legation in Washington. I hope that Mr. Nixon will make it very clear to the Soviet leaders that the United States now rejects and for time eternal shall continue to reject the Sovietization of Lithuania. And I hope that he will tell Mr. Brezhnev and Kosygin that right here in Chicago we continue to recognize the honorary Consul General of Lithuania, Mrs. Desvardis, as a viable living instrumentality of the legality of the Lithuanian government of pre-war Lithuania. that's why we're here today. And that's why so many of you have taken time off from a very busy Sunday. Many of you could be doing other things. But the Lithuanian people are an inspiration to ethnics all over America and all over the world. I was telling Mr. Bobelis a little while ago that I don't know of any ethnic group in this country and in this city that has been able to garner its young people to a continuing cause and the altar of dignity. Your Lithuanian organization has a greater support among young people than perhaps any other ethnic group. And this demonstrates to us what a good job you as parents have done in instilling in your children a deep realization of the beauty and the glory of the Lithuanian people. We're here today observing the 54th anniversary of Lithuania's independence. But actually, I know full well the beautiful history of Lithuania going back centuries. More than 1,000 years of glorious history of Lithuanians' contribution on the altar of human dignity and freedom. The Lithuanian Empire had been a great hallmark and a great inspiration. I remember only too well the wedding of Jagiełło and Jadwiga, an opening for the whole continent of Europe, a new concept and dignity and appreciation of Christianity. The Lithuanian people have made enormous contributions throughout their history. And it's so good to know that today we come here, assemble in this magnificent auditorium to rekindle our spirit and our great belief in the culture of the Lithuanian people. And it would be my hope that somehow or other this magnificent meeting today would reach across oceans and continents and persuade our president of the nobility and the majesty of your cause. As Americans, your great concern for your fellow Lithuanians behind the Iron Curtain. And that's why I hope that as the President makes his historic search for peace, you will make clear to China and Russia there can be no more Yaltas where the major powers decide the destiny of smaller nations throughout the world. When Mr. Nixon sits down with the Soviet leaders in the Kremlin, any agreements that are made over there ought to first be ratified by the leadership of the Lithuanian people. For indeed, it's time for this world to realize that the major powers can no longer predetermine the destiny of 2 billion people throughout this world. One of the things that the President could do on his way to or from Moscow is pay a visit to historic Vilnius and let the Lithuanian people know that America has not forgotten about their cause. And so, my friends, your presence here today honors the cause of freedom. I'm so proud of the work of the Lithuanian American Congress. For you give meaning to democracy. By maintaining these beautiful traditions and by insisting on justice, you demonstrate that America is not a melting pot. Too long have we gone under this concept that somehow or other America is a melting pot. We're like a piece of stew. They try to boil you into a common stew. We Americans are not a melting pot. We Americans are a beautiful mosaic made up of many people, many nationalities, many races, many religions, each of us providing the fibers for this beautiful mosaic, each of us providing our cultural heritage into this beautiful mosaic that makes up America. And who has a more beautiful contribution than the Lithuanian people? And for that reason, I congratulate the Lithuanian American Council for its intrepid dedication toward preservation of Lithuanian culture in America, and your stubborn refusal, continuing now for more than 25 years after World War II, your stubborn refusal to compromise with the deep and abiding principles of freedom so deeply inculcated in your blood. You are the real warriors in the cause of freedom. If by some magic today I could look into the veins and look at the blood flowing through those veins in your body, we could see a magnificent history of more than 1,000 years of stubborn Lithuanian insistence on human dignity and human freedom. That's what this holiday that we observe today was carved out. The determination of the Lithuanian people that they shall never be subjugated. And I tell you this, my fellow Americans, if you remain resolute as you are here today, don't waver and don't falter in the nobility of your cause. If you as free Americans continue demanding justice for Lithuania, that magnificent day when Lithuania will again rise into independence and sovereignty will be there, and all of us will be here to share in it. It will come. It must come. Because we know one thing. The history of the Lithuanian people says no man has ever been big enough or strong enough, no power has been big enough or strong enough to destroy the will of freedom, which you manifest so magnificently here today. Sudjel.
Thank you, Congressman Pucinski. And I'm very, very convinced that with your help, we achieve our main goal, independent and free Lithuania. Thank you again.
Dabar pristatau Aldoną Indreikaitę, kuri perskaitys porą šiai progai gautų telegramų.
I would like to read to you from our friends and well-wishers the names of people who have sent telegrams on this historic occasion. First of all, we have a telegram from Dr. Isabel Menakal, who is Fidel Castro's sister, Miami, Florida. Next, we have a telegram from Senator Frank Savitskas, State of Illinois, 27th District. Also, we have a telegram from Daniel P. Coleman, Democratic candidate for the Congress, 3rd District of Illinois. And finally, we have a telegram from Representative Robert M. Terzik, Illinois House of Representatives, 27th Legislative District. Thank you very much.
Mėly lietuviai, maloniai prašome atverti savo širdis ir piniginę auką paremti Lietuvos bylos reikalą. Aukas prašome įdėti į vokelius, kurie, aš tikiu, buvo išdalinti, ir užrašyti sumą, vardą, pavardę ir adresą, ir voką įmesti į tam reikalui paruoštas dėžutes, kurios randasi koridoriui. Dabar seka 15 minučių pertrauka. Ačiū.